Rich millionaire husband caught on a date with mistress in a private booth at a restaurant. Pregnant wife walks in secrets, can lurk behind the warm glow of candle-lit tables and crisp linen napkins, waiting for the perfect moment to burst into the open. In the midst of New York City's dizzying lights and clamor, one evening at Nobu restaurant would unfold into a night of shattered illusions and broken hearts. A millionaire husband, draped in arrogance and wealth, believed he could shield his hidden life from the world. He never suspected that fate or karma had other plans for him. Meanwhile, a pregnant wife prepared to step into a confrontation that would forever change her destiny. Brace yourselves for a tale of deception, heartbreak, and retribution that proves no one is invincible. New York City has a way of making even the most guarded hearts crumble under its sparkling promise of endless possibility. Towers of glass and steel pierce the clouds, and beneath them, millions chase their dreams or run from their nightmares. Amid this hustle and glamour, Alaric Caldwell had risen to the top. He was not just one of the many moneyed moguls. He was a household name in certain elite circles. His real estate developments sprawled across Manhattan. His philanthropic pursuits garnered headlines, and his knack for turning a profit had journalists touting him as a self-made genius. At 42, Alaric possessed the refined confidence of a man who believed he had mastered the rules of the game. He was tall, with well-groomed dark hair that never seemed out of place. His name frequently graced pages in magazines such as Forbes and Town and Country, and he reveled in the spotlight. Yet behind this polished exterior was a tapestry of secrets, carefully stitched to project an illusion of a perfect life. His wife, Ruth Caldwell, was known in social circles as the epitome of grace. A former art gallery manager, she had given up a burgeoning career to support Alaric's growing empire. Her decision wasn't made out of obligation. She truly loved her husband, or at least who she believed her husband to be. Their love story felt like a fairy tale at first, the charming millionaire sweeping the small-town girl off her feet. Now pregnant with their first child, Ruth had hoped that every disappointment, every rumor, and every sign of distance was just an obstacle to be conquered by love. Behind the locked door of a multi-million-dollar penthouse, their world was precariously balanced. Alaric's ambition often pushed him to the edge, and rumors about women in his life had swirled for years. Ruth found herself constantly battling gossip, family whispers, and her own nagging doubts. But time and again, Alaric returned home, contrite and laden with expensive gifts. She clung to the hope that once their baby was born, his attention would center on the family and all transgressions would drift away like a bad dream. Yet, illusions and secrets rarely remain locked away forever. In a city teeming with countless eyes and ears, the stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the very core of their world. For months, rumors circulated that Alaric was involved with someone else. More than one person had seen him sneaking off to private events with a mysterious companion. Sometimes he'd be rumored to appear at a gallery opening, not with Ruth, but with a tall blonde by his side. Other times, after-hour cocktails at hotel lounges were described by staff who were more than eager to spill secrets for the right price. Ruth tried to dismiss the chatter. She had her hands full curating the baby's nursery and reading up on childbirth. Yet, in the quiet hours, when Alaric's side of the bed remained cold well past midnight, she couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in her gut. She wished for the strength to confront him, but fear of his reaction and the potential fallout held her back. She was pregnant. She wanted a stable home, not a dramatic showdown. Nevertheless, her instincts kept nagging her. In the swirl of the city's social scene, even a friend can turn into a reluctant informant. Karen, an old college friend of Ruth's and a fellow socialite, confessed to catching a glimpse of Alaric at a Broadway after-party, locked in a private conversation with a woman who was definitely not Ruth. Karen added that they hadn't just been talking. The atmosphere between them crackled with a forbidden intimacy. Ruth felt torn between heartbreak and anger. She wasn't naive. She'd heard the rumors about Alaric's flirtations in the past. Yet something about this new affair felt different, more serious, more dangerous. The idea gnawed at her, refusing to let go, but she remained quiet, hoping to salvage the peace she'd built with so much effort. Her pregnancy had left her feeling vulnerable, and she clung to the hope that the rumors were just that baseless tales meant to stir scandal. Celeste Gray was a name whispered in exclusive lounges and swanky penthouses. She moved through Manhattan's glittering nightlife like a sleek shadow, capturing the attention of those with deep pockets. She was an interior designer and social climber, adept at convincing the wealthy they needed her creative touch in their homes or offices. But her real passion was turning connections into stepping stones for her own ambitions. She had grown up in a modest household on the outskirts of Chicago, always hungering for a life of luxury she saw in magazines like Vogue and Architectural Digest. So, Celeste molded herself into an image of sophistication, perfecting her manners and accent, forging relationships with the city's elite. By the time she was 30, her client list included more than a few of the town's big names, and she never hesitated to exploit those ties to climb higher. When she met Alaric at a charity gala at the Plaza Hotel, the chemistry was immediate. He was bored that night. His marriage was at a low point. His professional challenges were mounting, and he was drawn to Celeste's vibrant personality. Their affair started on a spark of physical attraction, but soon Celeste saw the potential in hooking one of the city's most influential real estate tycoons. It wasn't just about romance for her, it was about strategy. She knew Alaric had a powerful network, and through him, she could expand her design firm to reach unimaginable heights. She was aware he was married, but that did little to deter her ambitions. Instead, she convinced herself that if they kept things discreet, no one would be the wiser. What she didn't foresee was how quickly she'd develop real feelings for him. Their clandestine dinners, late-night calls, and secret weekend getaways blurred the lines between mere fling and genuine attachment. She savored his presence, loved the attention he lavished on her, attention he no longer gave to his wife. In her mind, Alaric was a brilliant man stuck in a dull marriage, and she was the spark that reignited his passion. But Celeste was no fool. She knew this game was dangerous. She feared public exposure, and the day might come when Alaric would have to choose between her and his pregnant wife. That day of reckoning loomed, heavy as a thundercloud, and she wondered if their relationship could survive the inevitable storm. Ruth found herself growing anxious with each passing day. Alaric's late-night returns had become the norm, peppered with explanations about urgent business dinners and last-minute deals that required his presence. His phone was always on silent, or so he claimed, because he was expecting important calls and didn't want to be disturbed at home. The excuses piled up like autumn leaves, each one brittle and ready to crumble under the slightest pressure. One evening, Ruth discovered a small clue that made her heart pound, a handwritten note on the back of a receipt, tucked away in Alaric's jacket pocket. The words were cryptic, referencing color palettes and furniture designs, but it ended with, "Miss you, can't wait till next time." It was signed with a simple C. Ruth felt her stomach churn. She recognized the feeling she'd had countless times, a mix of betrayal and fear. But now, with a baby on the way, every suspicion carried a far more significant weight. She decided she wouldn't confront him without concrete proof. Her fear of driving him further away battled her dread of discovering the truth. Driven by desperation, she confided in Karen, the same friend who had spotted Alaric at the Broadway after-party. Karen recognized Ruth's emotional spiral and urged caution. But that conversation only fanned the flames of Ruth's suspicion, and she found herself doing something she'd never imagined, discreetly following her own husband's movements. She learned that Alaric had a standing reservation at Nobu restaurant, typically on Wednesday nights. It was unusual because he rarely mentioned business dinners on Wednesdays. They usually happened on Thursdays or Fridays. Moreover, an acquaintance at Nobu, a hostess who knew Ruth slightly, confirmed Alaric often arrived before 8 and requested a private booth in the back, well hidden from prying eyes. He'd always be joined by the same woman. Ruth's heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vise. The puzzle pieces were finally fitting together, forming a picture that brought tears to her eyes. She decided that the next Wednesday she would be there too. The night was unusually cold for early December. Snow flurries danced against the neon lights of Times Square, while the well-heeled patrons of Manhattan's finest establishments scurried indoors to escape the biting wind. Ruth had draped herself in a chic, oversized coat that concealed her growing belly. She felt a pang of guilt for being out late, but she reassured herself that she needed to confirm the truth once and for all. Arriving at Nobu restaurant, she was almost paralyzed by fear and anticipation. She had called ahead to discreetly reserve a table, but not just any table. She wanted one with a vantage point that offered a glimpse of the private booths. When she stepped in, she noted the soft glow of the ceiling fixtures, the lively buzz of patrons enjoying their exquisite sushi and cocktails, and the gentle hum of conversation filling the air. She spotted the hostess she knew, who gave her a tight-lipped nod. Slipping into her seat, Ruth felt her heart pounding in her ears. She glanced at the clock on her phone. 7:50 p.m. Right on cue, Alaric strode into the restaurant at 7:55 p.m. He was dressed in an impeccably tailored suit, and Ruth's heart twisted in her chest. Less than 2 minutes later, Celeste entered, wearing a fitted black dress that accentuated her figure. They greeted each other with the warmth of longtime lovers. Ruth steadied her breath, forcing herself not to leap from her chair. Through the flickering candlelight, she could see their animated expressions. Alaric leaned in close, whispering something that made Celeste laugh and place a hand on his arm. The same arm that used to be reserved for Ruth alone. Pain shot through her, but a numb determination began to take hold. She watched them order drinks, smiling and talking in hushed tones, as if they were the only two people in the world. For a moment, she felt an odd sense of detachment, as though she were a spectator in a film, watching her own life unravel. At that moment, Ruth could have left, nursed her wounds in private, and pretended she didn't see this. But she realized she could never again live with herself if she turned a blind eye. The time had come to burst this carefully constructed bubble of deceit. Summoning every ounce of courage, Ruth rose from her seat and made her way toward the private booth. Each step felt heavier than the last, her heart hammering inside her chest. She saw Alaric and Celeste deep in conversation, oblivious to the storm marching right toward them. When Ruth finally stood before their table, the world around her seemed to shrink, the restaurant's gentle music and low chatter fading into white noise. She locked eyes with Alaric, who froze as if he had seen a ghost. Celeste's gaze darted between them, her confusion quickly morphing into alarm as she recognized who Ruth was. "Alaric," Ruth said softly, though her voice carried an intensity that demanded attention. "I'd say it's nice to see you, but under these circumstances, I'm not sure that's true." Alaric scrambled to his feet, nearly knocking over his glass of whiskey in the process. "Ruth, what? What are you doing here?" he stammered, his face draining of color. Celeste's eyes widened. For an instant, she looked genuinely stunned. Then, like a seasoned performer, she tried to regain her composure. This is just a business dinner," she offered, her voice quivering slightly. Ruth's gaze shifted to Celeste. She recognized that name, that face from bits of evidence she'd pieced together. "Business dinner in a private booth," she said. "Very cozy for just business." Alaric attempted to speak, but words failed him. In that excruciating moment, the entire facade of respectability he had cultivated for so long began to crumble. He looked helpless, caught between his pregnant wife and his mistress. Ruth's emotions roiled between heartbreak and rage. A part of her wanted to shriek, to hurl every ounce of pain and betrayal at both of them. But she surprised herself by speaking quietly, her voice trembling but controlled. "I'm pregnant with your child," she told Alaric. "While you're here playing fantasy with another woman, I'm carrying our baby. Do you have any idea how humiliating, how devastating this is?" The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Even some of the servers paused at a distance, aware that something monumental was happening. Alaric tried to reach out, but Ruth took a step back, tears streaking her cheeks. "Don't," she warned, "don't you dare." The moment felt like an eternity, a tableau of betrayal captured in the flickering candlelight. Ruth's eyes never left Alaric's. She didn't scream or threaten him with divorce. She simply turned and walked away, leaving him to face the weight of what he had done, and Celeste to grapple with the reality that the man she had invested so much in was slipping from her grasp. After the dramatic scene at Nobu, Alaric sprinted after Ruth, but only caught a glimpse of her as she vanished into the cold Manhattan night. He couldn't locate her in the swirl of traffic and pedestrians, and his mind whirled with panic and guilt. By the time he returned to the restaurant's entrance, Celeste was already gone, having slipped out a side door in mortification. For Ruth, hailing a taxi felt like the only lifeline left. She collapsed into the back seat, silent tears streaming as the city blurred past. She wasn't sure where she wanted to go home, felt like a war zone, haunted by the memories of trust shattered beyond repair. Yet, she also knew she couldn't roam the streets in her condition, especially on a freezing December night. Eventually, she ended up at Karen's apartment. Karen opened the door to find Ruth trembling, tears carving silent pathways down her face. In hushed disbelief, Karen guided her inside, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, and let her cry. Words were unnecessary. The raw pain in Ruth's eyes spoke volumes. Meanwhile, Alaric returned to their penthouse, expecting to find Ruth there. The place was silent, and he felt the crushing weight of emptiness in every room. He called her phone repeatedly, left texts and voicemails that danced between desperate apologies and frantic pleas to talk. But the phone remained silent. In the ensuing hours, uncertainty pressed down like a suffocating blanket. Alaric felt the creeping realization that his seemingly perfect life was rapidly disintegrating. His child, his heir, was in the womb of a wife who wanted nothing to do with him. And Celeste, who had tantalized him with her excitement and charm, had also stormed off, leaving him alone and humiliated. At that moment, the seeds of karma were planted, ready to sprout into something far more devastating than Alaric could ever anticipate. For days, Ruth remained at Karen's apartment, ignoring Alaric's calls. Karen tended to her, ensuring she ate and stayed hydrated. They both knew stress was dangerous during pregnancy, but heartbreak isn't easily soothed with logic. During those sleepless nights, Ruth vacillated between despair and steely resolve. She was furious, yes, but also deeply saddened. The man she had devoted years of her life to, the father of her unborn child, had betrayed her trust so thoroughly. Part of her longed to forgive him, to believe he could change, but another part recognized she had to consider her and her baby's future. Alaric's messages were relentless. He apologized, insisted it was a mistake, claimed the affair meant nothing, and begged for a chance to explain. But the time for explanations seemed long past. Ruth was exhausted by his deceptions, and for once she put her own emotional well-being first. Across town, Alaric wrestled with the shame of his public exposure. News traveled quickly among the city's elite. Some who were at Nobu that night wasted no time sharing the scandalous confrontation. Soon, business associates began to question his stability. The image of a confident mogul who had everything under control was replaced by rumors of reckless behavior and personal turmoil. Deals that were in progress became shaky. Investors who once trusted him without question started hesitating. Even the tabloids, always hungry for salacious stories, caught wind of the scuffle. An article surfaced on a gossip website alluding to a famous real estate developer's meltdown at a high-end restaurant. Though no names were directly mentioned, enough clues were dropped that those in the know had no trouble identifying Alaric. Within that maelstrom of chaos, Celeste found herself spurned. Her association with Alaric had become toxic. Clients called her to delay or cancel appointments. She was rumored to be the homewrecker behind a high-profile scandal. In desperate attempts to salvage her reputation, she made statements implying she had been duped by Alaric, that he'd promised her the marriage was already failing and that Ruth had no interest in him anymore. But the public has little sympathy for a mistress, especially one who flaunts her association with a married man. In the span of a week, the carefully built towers of illusions and wealth began to sway ominously, threatening to collapse under the weight of Alaric's betrayal. One afternoon, Ruth sat on Karen's couch, absently rubbing her belly. Karen entered with 2 mugs of chamomile tea and placed one in front of Ruth. The silence between them had lingered for nearly 10 minutes, both women lost in thought. Finally, Karen broke the hush. "Ruth, have you thought about what you want to do? About Alaric? About your future?" Ruth's eyes brimmed with tears, but she blinked them away, steeling herself. "I don't know," she admitted. "A part of me wants to punish him, but I also can't deny that he's the father of my child. This is so complicated." Karen nodded sympathetically. "You can't just think about yourself anymore, or even just him. You have to consider your baby. Sometimes a child needs their father. But is Alaric the kind of father you'd want your child to look up to?" Ruth winced. She had asked herself the same question countless times. "He's not a monster," she said softly. "He made a terrible choice, many terrible choices. But does that make him irredeemable?" Karen placed a comforting hand on Ruth's shoulder. "Only you can answer that. Sometimes people can change. Other times, they just keep repeating their mistakes. The question is, are you willing to risk it? And can you trust him again, if you ever did?" Ruth's gaze dropped to her hands, which were shaking ever so slightly. "I'm not sure I even know who he is anymore." Karen's voice grew gentle. "There's no deadline for your decision. But you do need to talk. You need clarity, even if that means closure." Ruth closed her eyes, letting the weight of Karen's words settle in. She knew that a confrontation with Alaric was inevitable. She also understood that the choices she made now would shape not only her own future, but that of her child. Quiet resolve began to crystallize within her. She felt a surge of protectiveness, a fierce maternal instinct that demanded she stand up for herself and for the baby. If Alaric was sincere about wanting to be part of their lives, he'd have to prove it. And if he wasn't, she would have to find a way forward on her own. Alaric, desperate to salvage his marriage and reputation, began reaching out not just to Ruth, but also to mutual friends, hoping someone could broker a meeting. He tried Karen, but she hung up on him, furious at the betrayal he'd inflicted on her friend. He reached out to some of Ruth's colleagues from her art gallery days, claiming he wanted to apologize in person. Eventually, word reached Ruth. Alaric was determined to meet her. She vacillated between dread and curiosity. She wanted to see the expression on his face when he tried to justify his betrayal. She wanted him to understand the depth of the pain he had inflicted. A few days later, Ruth agreed to a meeting. They chose a small, discreet cafe rather than their penthouse or Karen's apartment. It was the first time in nearly 2 weeks they'd be face to face since that night at Nobu. When Ruth arrived, Alaric was already seated, his eyes filled with anxiety. He stood as she approached, but she kept a distance, refusing his attempt at a greeting. They sat down, and an uncomfortable silence followed. Alaric broke it first. "I'm so sorry," he began, voice trembling. "What I did was inexcusable. I let my ego and my own selfish needs get the best of me. You didn't deserve that, and neither does our baby." Ruth folded her arms. "Do you love her?" she asked quietly, struggling to keep her voice steady. Alaric shook his head, moisture gathering in his eyes. "It was never love. It started as a distraction, something exciting. And I was stupid. Then everything spiraled out of control." "How long?" she pressed. He swallowed, eyes cast downward. "About 6 months." Ruth inhaled sharply. Pain etched across her face. For 6 months, he had lived a double life while she was building a world around their unborn child. She felt betrayed in a way words could never fully capture. "And what now?" she asked, her tone somehow both weary and resolute. Alaric fumbled for words. "I want to make this right. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll end it with Celeste if it isn't already over. I'll go to therapy, counseling, anything. Just, please, give me a chance to fix this." Ruth looked at him, sadness filling her gaze. "I'm not promising anything," she said softly. "I'm not sure I can trust you, but I'm willing to try counseling, if only to find clarity. If we can't fix this, then I have to move on for the sake of our child." Alaric nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. He reached across the table for her hand, but she pulled away. She couldn't bring herself to offer comfort, not yet. The chasm between them was still too wide, and she didn't know if it could ever be bridged. In a sleek office on the Upper East Side, Ruth and Alaric sat on opposite ends of a leather couch, flanked by a table strewn with tissues. Their therapist, Dr. Helena Moore, was known among the city's elite as a discreet but highly effective counselor. If there was any hope of reconciliation or even amicable separation, she might be their best chance. Session after session, Alaric divulged the deep-seated insecurities that had driven him to seek validation outside his marriage. He admitted that the intense responsibility of being a high-profile real estate mogul, the constant scrutiny, and his fear of failing had all contributed to his infidelity. Yet, none of that excused his betrayal, something Dr. Moore reminded him of gently but firmly. Ruth struggled, torn between the love she once felt and the bitterness she couldn't shake. Each time she recalled that night at Nobu, her heart clenched. She also wrestled with guilt. Had she been so focused on pregnancy preparations and the future that she neglected to see the cracks forming in their relationship? Dr. Moore guided them to communicate honestly about their needs, fears, and expectations. She warned them that rebuilding trust would be a long, arduous process. At times, Ruth felt it might be easier just to cut her losses and walk away. But she also recognized the father of her child was sitting in that room, and the baby's future loomed large in every decision she made. As the weeks passed, they made tiny steps toward understanding each other's wounds. Alaric made it clear he had cut ties with Celeste, even going so far as to forward an email he sent her stating the end of their affair. Yet, the intangible trust that once bound Ruth and Alaric was still missing. In one poignant session, Ruth finally let the tears flow. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "I'm about to become a mother, and I feel like the man I married disappeared. If I let you back in and you hurt me again, I don't think I'll recover." Alaric listened, his own tears burning hot. "I know I might never deserve your forgiveness, but I'm here, doing whatever it takes. I want to be a better man, a better father. And if that means you don't want to be with me, I'll still do everything I can for our child." The room was thick with raw emotion. Dr. Moore offered them a gentle smile, acknowledging the gravity of their honesty. It was a small sign of hope in a sea of heartbreak. Meanwhile, Celeste Gray's life was unraveling. Her clients had abandoned her in the wake of the scandal. Social media was awash with rumors and hateful comments, labeling her a gold digger and a homewrecker. She faced eviction from her swanky apartment after falling behind on rent. She tried reaching out to Alaric, but he refused her calls and emails. At one point, she showed up at his office, only to be escorted out by security. The city that once felt like her oyster now seemed to recoil from her like she carried a stigma impossible to wash away. In desperation, she turned to the media, thinking she might salvage her name or at least profit from the notoriety. She gave an exclusive interview to a gossip columnist, painting herself as a woman misled by a powerful man who had promised her a life of happiness and stability. She claimed she was unaware of Ruth's pregnancy until that fateful night at Nobu. Her version of events portrayed Alaric as a manipulator who exploited her ambitions. But the public sympathy she sought did not materialize. The general consensus was that she knew exactly what she was doing. Even tabloids, notorious for sensationalizing such affairs, seemed more interested in demonizing her than offering her a sympathetic platform. When her interview aired, it caused a brief stir, but rather than validating her story, it renewed the assault on her reputation. Her design firm hemorrhaged what few clients remained. She found herself burning through her savings just to stay afloat. As she sank deeper into financial and emotional disarray, a consuming bitterness took hold. She blamed Alaric for abandoning her and blamed Ruth for driving him away. She convinced herself she deserved to be compensated for all she had lost. One night, as she paced her nearly empty apartment furniture repossessed, boxes strewn across the floor, Celeste made a chilling decision. She would seek revenge on the man who had spurned her, who had cost her everything she had worked so hard to achieve. And she would do it in a way that would make him regret ever underestimating her. A few days later, Alaric received an unmarked envelope at his office. Inside was a single sheet of paper with an ominous message typed in bold letters: "Pay what you owe, or the world will see what you truly are." Alaric's blood ran cold. He immediately suspected Celeste. But what did she mean by the world will see? Did she have compromising photos, videos, or documents? His entire career and the fragile progress he was making with Ruth could be obliterated if Celeste possessed something incriminating. He didn't show Ruth the note. He didn't want to burden her further or risk the fragile trust they were rebuilding. Instead, he confided in his legal team, who advised him to ignore the threat unless more concrete evidence emerged. "If she tries anything public, we'll sue her for defamation," they assured him. But the note weighed heavily on his mind. A second envelope arrived 2 days later, this time containing a USB drive. An attached note read, "I wonder what Ruth would think of these." Despite the gnawing dread, Alaric steeled himself, locked his office door, and inserted the USB drive into his laptop. A series of photos flickered onto the screen, images of him and Celeste in hotel rooms, kissing passionately. In one series of pictures, Alaric was seen signing some sort of document. While Celeste hovered near him, he vaguely recalled some questionable real estate arrangement he had facilitated in exchange for her company. Alaric's head pounded. If these documents and photos went public, he could face not only a media storm but potential legal ramifications. His entire empire, painstakingly built, would be under threat. The final image on the USB drive was a recorded video snippet of him talking openly about how he bought off certain inspectors to push a real estate project through the city's labyrinth of regulations. He'd been boasting in front of Celeste, never imagining she might record him. Rage flared inside him. Celeste had set a trap, and he had walked right into it. Now, he understood her demand for money wasn't just an idle threat, it was blackmail. He sank into his chair, heart thumping wildly. If Celeste followed through, not only would he lose any chance of reconciling with Ruth, but he'd also likely face criminal investigations. Karma, it seemed, was indeed preparing to deliver its blow. Oblivious to the looming blackmail, Ruth continued her therapy sessions with Alaric. She noticed he seemed more anxious lately, as though something else was weighing on him. Whenever she asked, he dismissed it as business stress. She tried to give him space, hoping the therapy and time would help them heal. In a session with Dr. Moore, Ruth discovered a new fear. She was terrified that reconciling with Alaric would trap her in a cycle of infidelity and heartbreak. "I've given him so many chances," she confessed, tears sliding down her cheeks. "How do I know this time is different?" Dr. Moore encouraged her to monitor Alaric's actions. Words are one thing, but consistent, trustworthy behavior is another. Only time will reveal if he has truly changed. Deep down, Ruth wanted to believe in redemption after all. She had built her life around a man she'd once adored. But part of her recognized that she had been betrayed repeatedly. She oscillated between cautious hope and lingering doubt, unsure which was more justified. Then, one afternoon, while Ruth was resting, she received a voicemail from a blocked number. The voice on the other end belonged to Celeste. "I know you have no reason to trust me," Celeste began, her tone dripping with venom. "But I think you should know that Alaric is hiding more secrets from you. He's about to pay me a large sum of money to keep certain indiscretions from going public. You might want to think twice before believing anything he tells you." The message ended abruptly, leaving Ruth with a spinning head. She had no proof that Celeste was telling the truth. This could just be a bitter ploy to destroy any chance of reconciliation. Yet, the possibility that Alaric was once again hiding something significant felt all too plausible. Ruth realized, with a heavy heart, she could no longer trust Alaric's word. She needed to find out the truth, and she had to do it on her own. Determined to learn whether Celeste's claim was real or just malicious sabotage, Ruth decided to confront Alaric in a way that left little room for evasion. She texted him to come to Karen's apartment that evening, stating, "We need to talk. Alone." Alaric arrived looking weary, his eyes ringed by dark circles. He took a seat on the couch, while Ruth stood, arms crossed, near the window. She didn't waste time on small talk. "I got a voicemail from Celeste," she said bluntly. "She claims you're paying her off to bury some scandalous evidence. Is it true?" Alaric froze. He hadn't expected Celeste to drag Ruth into her scheme so blatantly. His hesitation spoke volumes. "Answer me," Ruth demanded, her voice taut. Alaric swallowed hard, deciding whether to lie or come clean. He looked at Ruth, her belly showing more prominently now, a silent reminder of the life they were supposed to nurture together. He let out a shaky breath. "She has photos and videos," he admitted, "and some documents that could ruin us. She's threatening to release them if I don't pay her a huge amount of money. I was trying to protect you and our child from the fallout." Ruth's heart pounded. "So you planned to keep me in the dark while you secretly handled it?" He rubbed his forehead. "I didn't want to burden you. Everything is already fragile between us, and I didn't want to risk losing you again." Ruth shook her head, bitterness rising in her throat. "All you've done is confirm that you still hide important truths from me. You still haven't learned. It's all about control, controlling the narrative, controlling the damage, controlling me." Alaric clenched his fists, desperation etched on his face. "No, I swear it wasn't about control. It was about saving what we have left. And yes, saving my career. But that career is also what provides for you and our future child." Ruth's eyes welled with tears, fury and sorrow, mixing like oil and water. "You think money is the most important thing here? You broke my trust again. You can't see that the real damage isn't the scandal, it's the constant deception." For a moment, the room seemed to vibrate with tension. Then Ruth made a decision that felt both frightening and necessary. "I need space, Alaric. I need to think about what kind of life I want for me." And this baby, right now, you're just proving you'll sacrifice honesty for your own self-preservation." He stood, as if wanting to console her, but she recoiled. "Please don't," she whispered. "Just leave." Alaric opened his mouth to speak but closed it again, recognizing that no words could fix this moment. He left in silence, the echo of a slamming door, the only testament to how fractured their lives had become. In the following weeks, Alaric attempted to negotiate with Celeste through lawyers and private intermediaries. He wanted an airtight non-disclosure agreement in exchange for her silence. But Celeste was determined to squeeze as much as she could out of him. She demanded an astronomical sum, one that risked draining even his considerable finances. Meanwhile, the city's business community sensed blood in the water. Rumors swirled of Alaric's impending downfall. Several of his major investors threatened to pull out of upcoming deals if he didn't resolve the scandal swiftly. The real estate market, fickle as ever, offered no mercy. Finally, Celeste played her trump card. She leaked just enough of the incriminating material to a prominent tabloid to create a media frenzy. The article that appeared online featured blurred photos of Alaric in compromising situations and hinted at unethical business dealings. Although names were omitted and details were vague, the damage was done. Alaric's phone blew up with calls from journalists seeking comments, associates withdrawing support, and outraged city officials promising investigations if the rumors of bribery proved true. His pristine reputation lay in shreds, replaced by scandal and suspicion. As if fate decided to twist the knife deeper, a disgruntled former employee stepped forward with allegations of fraud in Alaric's company. Suddenly, multiple fronts threatened him: blackmail, potential legal actions, and a battered personal life. Ruth watched from afar, torn between dismay and grim vindication. She didn't wish ruin on Alaric, but she could not deny that his downfall felt like the reverberation of his own choices. He had built an empire on shaky ethics and illusions. Now, those very foundations were cracking beneath him. The final blow came when the city froze one of Alaric's biggest real estate projects, pending a full investigation into claims of corruption. Investors scattered, stocks plummeted. Alaric's once towering empire teetered dangerously close to collapse, forcing him to make a choice: keep fueling Celeste's demands, or let her destroy what remained. In a move that many considered inevitable, Alaric publicly resigned as CEO of Caldwell Enterprises, citing personal reasons and a desire to focus on family. Behind the scenes, he negotiated to sell off key assets to cover the hush money, legal fees, and mounting debts. If Celeste wanted to dismantle him, she had nearly succeeded. As the dust settled, Ruth found herself at a crossroads. She had been living with Karen for weeks now, turning her friend's spare room into a small sanctuary for herself and the baby. The months had rolled by and her due date was drawing ever closer. She needed stability, a home where she could welcome her child into the world. Alaric requested a meeting once more, this time at Ruth's convenience. He had moved into a smaller apartment after letting go of the penthouse. Even his wardrobe showed signs of the cutbacks. He had to make his once impeccable suits now looked slightly worn and less tailored. When Ruth arrived, he offered her a seat. She noticed how haggard and defeated he looked. This was not the confident mogul who had once swept her off her feet. This was a man laid low by his own actions. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice subdued. Ruth nodded, clasping her hands in her lap. "I'm here because the baby is due soon. I want clarity about where we stand." Alaric exhaled. "I've lost almost everything, Ruth. The company, my reputation gone. I'm sure you've seen the headlines. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I brought this on myself. If you never want to see me again, I won't hold it against you." The sincerity in his tone struck her. "I'm not here to kick you when you're down," she said softly. "I'm here because, despite everything, you're still the father of my child. I haven't decided whether I can forgive you, but I don't want our baby to grow up without a father. Alaric's eyes glistened with tears he tried to hold back. I'll do whatever it takes to be there for you and the baby. I don't care if that means we never get back together as husband and wife. I just want to be a good father. I need to be. Ruth took a moment to steady her emotions. I haven't stopped caring about you as a human being, she admitted, but I can't ignore what you did. Trust isn't something you can replace with money or apologies. It has to be rebuilt over time, and I'm not sure if that's even possible. They spoke for hours, discussing the future in careful, realistic terms. They talked about co-parenting arrangements, financial support, and possible therapy sessions focused on parental cooperation. Ruth made it clear that reconciliation was far from guaranteed. Alaric seemed to accept it, albeit with visible heartbreak. For once, he wasn't trying to control the narrative. He listened attentively, aware that everything now depended on how well he could prove his sincerity, not with grand gestures, but with consistent, humble effort. A few weeks later, Ruth went into labor on a clear winter's day. Karen rushed her to the hospital. She called Alaric, who arrived soon after, face lined with anxiety and concern. They barely spoke as the nurses took Ruth to the delivery room, but Alaric refused to leave her side, offering gentle encouragement when the pains intensified. For hours, Ruth labored. The contractions came in waves, each one stronger and more demanding than the last. Alaric held her hand, whispering words of support, tears flowing freely as he saw her endurance and determination. In her agony, Ruth didn't have the energy for resentment or anger. She focused on bringing new life into the world. At last, their daughter was born, a tiny, perfect being who let out a sharp cry that pierced the tense stillness. Ruth's eyes brimmed with awe and relief. Alaric's breath caught in his throat as he was handed the tiny bundle swaddled in blankets. He felt overwhelmed by the fragility and wonder of this new life. As Ruth cradled the baby, Alaric hovered close, tears streaking his face. "She's beautiful," he choked out. Ruth nodded, her own tears mixing with sweat and exhaustion. Their eyes met in a profound moment that transcended the turmoil of the past months. For that instant, there was only love for the small life they had created together. When the nurses left them to rest, the hush of the hospital room felt oddly serene. Their baby girl slept in Ruth's arms, unaware of the complicated world she had entered. Alaric timidly reached out, touching the soft curve of her cheek. "Thank you," he murmured to Ruth. "Thank you for letting me be here." Ruth nodded, too exhausted to speak. Her emotions were tangled: love, fear, hope, and uncertainty all at once. But as she gazed at their daughter, she felt an undeniable sense of unity, if only for a moment. Outside, the city carried on, oblivious to the quiet miracle that had just occurred in a small hospital room. Yet, within those walls, a new chapter had begun, one that might offer redemption, or sorrow, or both. Over the next several weeks, Alaric devoted himself to fatherhood. He brought groceries and baby supplies to Karen's apartment, changed diapers, and attended pediatric appointments with Ruth. The tabloids' frenzy over his downfall had cooled, replaced by newer scandals. Celeste was conspicuously absent from the headlines, rumored to have left the city. In small increments, Ruth saw changes in Alaric. He no longer spoke with the same arrogance, no longer insisted on controlling every situation. If the baby cried in the middle of the night, he would rock her gently, singing lullabies off-key. He even joined Ruth in postnatal checkups, genuinely interested in supporting her health as she recovered. However, the pain of betrayal still lurked beneath the surface. Ruth found it difficult to let her guard down. On several occasions, she pulled away if Alaric reached to hug her. She was still living at Karen's, where she had converted the spare room into a temporary nursery. "Do you want to move back in with me?" Alaric asked one day, his tone tentative. "I mean, I'd completely understand if you don't," But I just wanted to ask. Ruth lowered her gaze. I'm not ready, she replied. I appreciate how you've stepped up as a father. But being a husband is a different story. I need more time. He nodded, not pressing the matter. Whatever you need, I'll respect that. They continued co-parenting, forging a fragile peace. Slowly, Ruth allowed Alaric to take the baby for strolls in Central Park, trusting him to be responsible and safe. She occasionally accompanied them, noticing how fatherhood had softened him in ways she once thought impossible. And yet, the question of whether they could rebuild a marriage remained. Whenever Karen asked if Ruth intended to file for divorce, Ruth shook her head, uncertain. I don't know, she would say. Some days, I'm sure it's over. Then other days, I see how good he is with our daughter, and I wonder if we can make it work. Life had become a balancing act between caution and the faint glimmer of hope. Ruth was determined not to let the baby grow up in a house of secrets and lies. If Alaric wanted a future with them, he would have to prove himself every single day. Months passed, and the slow process of healing continued. Alaric's legal troubles simmered down after he settled with Celeste and cooperated with certain investigations, leading to lesser penalties than he might have otherwise faced. He started a new, smaller real estate consulting firm, determined to run it without shortcuts or bribes. Ruth witnessed him decline unethical opportunities, ones he would have eagerly seized in his previous life. She noticed genuine remorse in how he handled discussions about the past. He stopped blaming external circumstances and took responsibility for the choices he had made. Their counseling sessions with Dr. Moore resumed, this time focusing on healthy communication and conflict resolution. Over many weeks, Ruth found herself gradually lowering her defenses. She saw a man striving to become better, not just for appearances, but from a deep place of humility. Eventually, Ruth agreed to move back in with Alaric, not to the old penthouse, but to a modest townhouse he had purchased to start fresh. She brought the baby, along with her own lingering doubts. Alaric welcomed them with gratitude, assuring her they could leave at any time if she felt unsafe or unhappy. In those quiet halls, they began the painstaking work of becoming a family. Ruth set firm boundaries, and Alaric respected them. He awoke early to feed their daughter, gave Ruth breaks for her own self-care, and never once shied away from the hard conversations they needed to have. It was far from a fairy tale. The wounds of betrayal left scars that would never fully fade. But in the slow, daily acts of care, compromise, and unwavering honesty, they found a path forward, one that offered redemption, if not perfection. Celeste, for her part, vanished from their lives. Rumor had it she moved to the West Coast, seeking new opportunities or perhaps new prey. In the end, the storm she unleashed brought Alaric's empire to its knees, but also forced him to confront his darkest failings. The karma he reaped was harsh, yet it also granted him a second chance to rebuild his life on a foundation of genuine integrity. As for Ruth, she emerged stronger. She no longer lived in Alaric's shadow. She demanded equality, respect, and transparency, and she received them. Their daughter, innocent and full of promise, became the beacon guiding them toward a future they hoped would be kinder and more honest than the past. Life rarely grants neat endings wrapped with a bow. Alaric faced the unimaginable collapse of his fortune and his public persona, yet his greatest challenge was regaining the trust of the family he almost destroyed. Meanwhile, Ruth, heartbroken but resolute, discovered an inner strength that transformed her from a naive partner into a loving mother who insists on honesty and respect. In the end, their story isn't about a perfect reconciliation. It's about acknowledging flaws, seeking redemption, and finding hope in the unlikeliest places. If this drama kept you on the edge of your seat, imagine the twists and turns that remain unwritten in the chapters of life. There's always more to explore, more to learn, and more ways our choices can come back to haunt or heal us. So, if you found inspiration or caution in this tale, make sure to like this video, share it with friends, and subscribe for more dramatic stories and heartfelt journeys. Your support means the world.